Prynawn da and croeso, good afternoon and welcome to the TikTok Takeover with Delith Jewel, hosted by myself, Morgan Bowler-Brown, and with some very special guests from Welsh TikTok. We've got Delith, Catrin Williams, we've got Meg Fleur-Coates and Lewis Owen. Later on, we'll be joined by Ellis Jones. I'm going to hand you over to our guests now so they can introduce themselves and ask them to describe themselves in 3 words. So we'll start off with Catrin.
Okay, hi. So I'm Catrin, or Cat for short. Describe myself in 3 words. I would probably say I'm passionate, outspoken, and caring, I hope. My TikTok is cat with 6 T's and 4 underscores.
Thanks, Kat. That was very specific. Moving on, look.
And I've got so many questions later. I want to know why the 60s, but I'll wait.
Next up, we've got Meg.
Hello, my name is Meg Fleur-Coates and I'm 27 from Cardiff. I have got my own small business, which is Pethine, and my TikTok handle is @MegFleur, which is FFLUR. If I had to describe myself in 3 words, I'd probably just boost it up to 4. Confident, creative, and a risk taker.
That's cheating, but we'll let you have it. Also, shout out to Pethine. For anyone who doesn't know, I feel incredibly down with the kids that I do. It's an incredible Welsh clothing brand and just some really nice, cool stuff. We'll move on to Lewis. Oh, here we go.
Hi, I'm Lewis Owen. My TikTok is @LewisOwen59. It was not generated well because I didn't actually intend to use TikTok. Here we are. But I'd say my brand is solely based on Welsh independence. That's all I do. That's what I can do. So I'd probably describe myself as, in 3 words, very over Westminster. Yeah, that's my thing, is independence, and I'm very critical.
Very on brand. Well done. Great stuff, Cole. So as we were talking about, basically, this is going to be a really informal chat. We're just sort of asking questions. If you feel like you want to ask a different question, shout out. It's all good. We're also going to be taking questions from the audience. So there's a couple of comments that are coming through already. Catrin serves elite Welsh Nash TikToks, to be fair. Excellent. Can we all just take a moment to appreciate Lewis's shirt?
Thank you.
It is a nice shirt.
Yeah,
It is very nice. It's
So,
very weather appropriate as well.
it's not very cool. It's
no.
But it looks nice, so
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of weather, this is quite good. It takes us straight into our first sort of topic, which is about the whole theme of this talk is young people getting active in politics and sort of overcoming that barrier that most young people feel about how do I get involved with politics, or why should I get involved with politics? And recently we've seen the climate strikes and a lot of young people, a lot of students getting involved and protesting for climate change or for climate justice, against climate change. And that leads us to our first topic. Have any of you taken part in some of the climate strikes? Or no? Or anyone got anything in particular they want to talk about?
I was really impressed by the climate strikes, with all the people like missing school to go. I think it was brave, like very brave, to make that, jump to actively miss school. And Greta obviously is great. I wasn't in school while it was happening, but I thought that I would have joined in if I was, I could have joined in anyway, I guess. That's something I'll definitely try in the future.
Well, I took my 10-year-old to her first ever protest in Bristol for the big climate strike when Greta was there. We made a point of capping public transport and making taking our food with us and recycling everything that we bought. And it made us really think about how important the little things that we do in life are, and how being a young person shouldn't be a barrier to having big changes. That's the real message that I'm most proud of from the climate strikes, is the fact that it's embodied and enabled a lot of young people to say, actually, I can make a difference.
Well, yeah, and like, sorry to jump in, but like, not just that young people can make a difference, but it has to happen. It has to be led by young people. And I think that one of the things that has really inspired me is actually that the climate strikes and the Extinction Rebellion protests, that I was part of some of them last year and I've spoken some of them, they made politicians have to sit up and take notice. So in one of the protests I was in last year, there was a young guy, he was 16, and he was holding a sign that said, "The emperor has no clothes." And he was making the point and saying that, you know, we've been saying for so long that, like, you know, politicians have been saying, oh yeah, you know, we know that there's this crisis with climate change, yeah, we'll sort it, and they're putting it off. Actually, there's no plan B, there's no planet B. We have to sort this. If it weren't for people like Greta Thunberg actually forcing the world to take notice, I think we would be doomed. Because there is something about politics which, and politicians often, not always, but often, that there's a coziness that can creep into it, and that we like the status quo. I'm not saying we as the political class, but I think that establishments have to be forced away from the status quo. We have to strive for something to change. And if it was just politicians arguing for that, I'm not sure that people would take notice. But when young people actually, like Pat was saying, went out to school and said, no, actually, this is our future, you have to listen, it made people feel uncomfortable in a good way, because sometimes we need to create that discomfort. Because for God's sake, if we can just stay comfortable about something like the climate emergency, we are doomed.
That's it. And people were like criticizing them for saying that they were disruptive of a lot of stuff, but protests need to be to make that change, to have that impact. If it's not disruptive, then nobody will pay attention. So I think it is important that people are disrupted by these protests.
Biggest definitely comes from disruption. If you look at all the rights that we've won over the years, have come from protest and, you know, disruption. And like you said, the status quo doesn't work, whether that's anything. I think nothing. And the fact that, you know, children and young people are raising their voices and that they're not, you know, just conforming is a really good thing. And it's the responsibility really of the governments and the big corporations that really need to sort out the climate issue. And, you know, to see young people, if I was in school now, I would 100% be there. And to see young people using the platform that they've created for themselves to demand a better future, I think it's we're seeing a kind of revolution happen, and I'm so here for it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, we'll talk probably a bit more about this subject later on, because it is quite personal to one of our speakers, Ellis. When he joined, he lives in the Rhondda, and there's been villages in the Rhondda flooded again now for the fourth or fifth time this year. You know, why is this happening for our community? How can we stop it? Climate justice is important because it means that these people are being helped. It's important because it matters to these people, and that goes back to, you've got the people that are there that are angry that they have been flooded in their homes for, like, say, the fourth or fifth time, and for them now that's politics. That is how you get them involved. Most people don't see that link going from what you hear about to this thing that suddenly really matters to you. And it could be anything. It could be the climate emergency. It could be social justice. It could be independence. It could be finding the right job or going to the right school, or it could be flooding in your communities. You know, once you've got that thing and you are passionate about something, whatever that may be, that's how you open your eyes to what politics really is. Because it's not, excuse me, Dennis, but it's not stuffy old men sitting in a chamber arguing or flooring back and forth at each other, or waving bits of paper and booing each other, because that's pantomime. Yeah. What politics really is the things that matter to you. Like Meg, as a young business owner, I'm sure there's loads of things that annoy you with how it's set up, that if you could change, you probably would. That's politics, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with COVID and things like that. If there's been so many loopholes where people like me have fallen into this black hole of no help at all. So yeah, it's definitely something that I would like to change, especially for startups.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Like what's going on at the moment is an incredibly disruptive time. Big changes always come from disruption. As Lewis said, a protest is a riot unless it gets something changed. You know, how you feel being a business owner and being left behind when other businesses, arguably bigger businesses that don't necessarily or probably shouldn't need that support, is a bit unjust. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but when you look at big businesses like KFC, McDonald's getting support for, eat out to help out, and then small businesses don't get the same thing, it doesn't feel right. You know?
No, I know. I'm in quite like a good community in Cardiff of like young startups, and there's like if we were like set up in the last year and we don't have a tax return and we were unable to get absolutely any help from anyone, and yeah, it was soul destroying. I've been speaking to so many of my like community, my startup community, and they're thinking, if this doesn't sort itself out soon, I'm going to have to go and get a full-time job. And like for people who quit their jobs and put themselves on the line to get to start up a business.
Oh.
Wow.
We lost you for a second there.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. Some of the rules just felt so arbitrary as well. Like, some charities were excluded from the same sort of furlough scheme because they were deemed to be political. Again, though, this is the frustration that almost everything is political.
Yeah.
If you're
sorry.
If you're a charity,
jobs.
Exactly. That's the bottom line.
It doesn't matter if it's political. It's still people's livelihoods, people's jobs. Yeah. They still need help.
Exactly. And what's happened with the furlough scheme, had it not, in some ways you could say, had it not been the Conservative Party in government in Westminster, we probably wouldn't have been able to have had something quite so that even went this far. Because if the Labour Party had been in power, they probably would have been too scared to do something that was this interventionist.
Yeah.
But it's still arbitrary, and there's still so many people were able to fall between different stools and not be supported. And what's also really frightening, I know, for so many people, is people who have been supported with the furlough scheme, and that's now coming to an end. Basically they're just going to be, left to the market devices. I don't want to get too political too early in the chat, but I think that I'm going to for a second anyway. I think that this crisis has kind of exposed so many things, like the flaws in the capitalist system. I know. I went there. I did.
At least 30 minutes.
But it has in so many ways, because the fact that we had so much poverty in our communities. I know we're going to be talking about flooding later. Yes, that's to do with climate change, but it's also to do with the fact that these were the poorest communities who had not had the help with their building repairs. They've had flooding so many times before. It happened once already this year, for God's sake. And the repair works that the councils know have to have got done were not undertaken. That wouldn't have happened if they were in Kensington. It just, we just don't get the same support. And they are so, and again, I know that I'm covering all the topics. Sorry, Morgan, I will bring it back from chaos, I promise. But there's so many problems with our society that have been exposed by the crisis. And we've got an opportunity to change things, but we have to actually choose the things that we want to fight for and make sure that we as a society in Wales are different after the crisis. But yeah, in terms of of what support has been available to different parts of people who have their own businesses or people who have not been helped by the furlough scheme. I think the arbitrary nature of it has just been, it's easy for me to say it's been difficult. Meg, you've actually been living it. Like some of the people who I've been helping in my region, there was one family that they've got two sons. Both of the sons run their own businesses. One of the businesses was very long established, and so he qualified for support. And then one of them used to be a teacher, and I think something like 6 months before the crisis had started his own business. And because it was too young a business, he didn't qualify for support. It was nothing, the business was still a really successful venture, but because of just that lack of luck that it happened at the wrong time. He just didn't qualify for sport. I mean, that's not
And it is just
fair.
luck. It is just luck that it just so happened that he started later, so he doesn't get it, and that's just it's not fair, you know, because it's still a business that he started. That should be a good thing. We should be supporting like newer businesses.
That's exactly what happened to me as well. Sorry, I'm just going to say that's exactly what happened to me. So I started last July. I quit my job, so I was, relying on the income of my business. I was classed as high risk, so because I've got chronic asthma, I was unable to leave the house, so I couldn't sell anything, and all my stock is at my mum and dad's spare bedroom where I had my office. So for 5 months, I was unable to make a penny, and I was trying to pivot and think of other ideas because, I'm quite obviously entrepreneurial, but things take a lot of time. So by the time I'd sort of established something new, I could open my shop again. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, I just spent the last 5 months trying to pivot. And now here I am opening my shop again. But I had amazing support from people when I first opened again. I sold out of all my stock in like 2 weeks. So there is a really good support network. But for 5 months, I was eating out all my life savings, just paying the bills. So now I don't actually have any money to invest in the business. So yeah, I've just been applying for grants and I'm not getting any of them.
Do you think in terms of what you had been planning that you might pivot to, God, I know we all hope that there won't be a second wave, but if there were a second wave later in the year, do you think that might be something that you could do in that event, or is it something which actually was really time sensitive?
I was I did have a big Instagram following until Instagram deleted my account, and a lot of young females would message me asking me for advice on how to start a business. So during COVID, I was actually giving out mentoring sessions on that. But as much as I loved doing it, I still just kind of wanted to go back to what I was doing before, just because that's where sort of my passion really lies. But if I basically coming up with a business model where I could potentially run my business without actually having to hold my own stock. So it's just all about finding new ways to do things and to try and mitigate risks as much as possible.
And that's really inspiring that you've been mentoring other young women. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and then I created a whole course, a 7-section course where I was sending that to people. And I also did a free PDF to try and summarize some points and stuff, because I think everyone should try and have a go at entrepreneurship if that's something that they're interested in, because it is really rewarding.
No, that's perfect. And that is a real nugget there, because it says a lot about you as a person. The fact you're willing to help other young people start a business. I completely agree with you. Everyone should at least try it if they can. If they've got an idea that they think is worth it. The worst thing you can do is have an idea that you think is really good and would be really successful, not bite the bullet and do it, and then someone else comes out 6 months later and does exactly that. It's so demotivating. It makes you feel so rubbish, because I could have done that. And that's the thing, nobody wants to have that feeling. Before we move on to another subject, I just want to bring it cycle back just a little bit to what Catherine said a few minutes ago about luck. And a lot of things that happen in the world, a lot of injustice that happens in the world does come down to luck. Luck of where you're born, luck of who your parents are, luck of what gender you are, luck of what school you go to. And a lot of the things that matter to me, or have mattered to me in the past, were things that I felt that were out of my control, things that were unjust that were happening to me, because of if I do something, I am an adult, and I know if I do something and it goes wrong, it's up to me. Yeah, it's on me, and it's the same for you lot. You are grown-ups. If you do something and it goes well, great. If it doesn't, it's on you. It's not when things happen that are out of your control, it feels so demoralizing. And you see then people that are being attacked for trying to find themselves and their family better lives. I'm not going to say his name, but a very grumpy old man shared a very derogatory tweet and video recently.
I don't think grumpy is the right adjective, but yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Being polite, we're going to pick the moral high ground. We'll always be as polite as we possibly can. He's definitely got grumpy over something. But he shared a video of people landing on the beach in a dinghy. They're risking their lives and the lives of their family to cross the channel to come to what they feel is a better life for them. The only difference between everyone in this chat and them is purely luck from where we are born. And that's what makes me angry when people attack people for things that are out of their control.
And also, if people, the thing is, people attack them for making these choices, coming in the boats, whatever, but they would do the exact same thing if they were in that position. They can't have the empathy to see that what they're struggling with is so difficult. That's why they're making those choices. They're not making them for just we'll see how it goes. They're desperate, they need to make those choices, but people just seem blind to that empathy to be able to see that, and it's ridiculous.
It's purely scapegoating. These people are using the most vulnerable people in our society, so whether it be refugees or trans people or anyone who's vulnerable, they're using that as a scapegoat to detract from other things. So, for example, any kind of scandals that are going on with money, which there is a lot in Westminster, and around those kinds of places, because we know there's a lot of corruption and stuff like that going on. So it's really easy to find the most vulnerable people and try and get a pylon to detract the focus elsewhere. Look at, for example, like you said, you don't want to get too political, but it's me, so I'm going to.
Can get political, everyone can.
But the thing is, for example, with the UK government's really bad response to the pandemic, the death rate, for example, has been terrible. Then, people are jumping on vulnerable people that need help to try and detract from this failing of government. And we've seen this for years. I mean, Brexit is obviously a really big example of this. But it's shameful, really, that the media as well allow or use this to get coverage, or basically online clickbait. They use it because it attracts attention. Then you've got people having arguments in comment sections, and it creates a lot of traffic for media and for these outlets. But I think it sullies politics, and it brings things to the mud. We need to be lifting people up, not trying to tear them apart.
The newspapers and their headlines are ridiculous. You see recently with all the Black Lives Matter, all the headlines were oh, this show is being made to be taken down because people are so offended by the language used in it, when really nobody's asking them to take these shows down. No. The networks are taking them down on their own choice, but then the newspaper articles are written as though it's left-wing crazy people who are we need to take them down now, and that's just not the case. But it's scapegoating them, and it makes it seem like the entire thing is ridiculous, and it's not. It's just not, but people see the headlines and they believe it.
Yeah,
it's argument. Yeah,
it's like with when I think every Christmas for the last I don't know how many years now.
Yes.
Certain newspapers, I'm not going to name names because they don't need the attention. Say things like you're changing Santa Claus's name to be a gender neutral figure or something like that. First of all, that's not happening.
It's not.
It's not. But they want to scapegoat non-binary people or trans people as some kind of clickbait to generate these arguments. And I think that's just awful, because these are the people who need our help the most. And it's just really bad.
It is disgusting that they care more about money and clicks than they do about these people who are, facing such hardship. It's awful.
Yeah, it is. It's quite disgusting, actually. By the way, Lewis, I love that you're living the dream and drinking from an Eisteddfod cup. Yeah, living the dream with it. But I mean, I think that it is, these tactics are vilifying people who are at the most, whether we're talking about people who are trans, whether we're talking about the refugees who were photographed coming off the dinghy in Kent this week, people who are in a very vulnerable situation, and they're being vilified. And I think we have to ask why it is that kind of where people with power and people who are given a platform are doing that. And I think with the Morgan, you described Farage as being I can't even remember what the word was because I was angry that it wasn't strong enough. well, I've outed him now. So I mean, he. Oh, I mean, the tweet that he put up was obviously a desperate attempt to get some kind of relevance and to reignite a hateful discussion again. And I know, hey, everything that's happened the past years since 2016 about the Brexit debate, it wasn't all about this, but there were elements of the debate where people who actually, we have since discovered, have done everything they can to get away from the Brexit debate. In terms of that same person, I won't name him again, but apparently he has made sure that his children had German passports, and you know, lots of the tycoons who were who backed that campaign have relocated out of the UK because they can see that they're actually going to be losing money if they stay in the UK because of it. I mean, people with vested interests vilifying the people who have nothing to do with the debate in order to get people to kind of look away, look over there, and to distract from the really awful things, that the real things that are going on. But I mean, the point that was, I think it was Kat who'd made it, maybe been Lewis, about how it was Kat saying the lack of empathy that people have when we're talking about the refugees. I wonder what you all think about this. I mean, I think that, it's definitely a lack of empathy that people have, but I think it's also a lack of imagination. Because, and that's what people always said about, I can't remember who was the person who'd said it originally, but one of the commentators had said this about Thatcher, that her main failing was her lack of imagination, because she could not put herself in the shoes of someone who was less fortunate, and say with the minus striking about, she couldn't imagine what it was like to be in that situation. So I mean, some people would say that that's letting her off the hook, because I mean, she should have been able to see it. But I think that a lack of empathy comes from a lack of imagination, just not being able to. It's the same, isn't it? It's not being able to empathize, not being able to put yourself in someone else's situation. And it all comes down to the lack of circumstance, and when we're born, where we happen to be born. You know, the people would never put their lives and their children's lives at risk of crossing the ocean in a small boat. If, it's that famous quotation, they wouldn't put themselves in the boat if the land was more dangerous than the sea. I mean, none of us know what that's like. Exactly.
No. Exactly.
Gareth, you and I a couple of times have spoken to some of the amazing people in the Kurdish community in Gwent and Cardiff. You know, we've got now some real powerful, impressive people that are members of Plaid because of the support that you and your predecessor did to help them. And every single time this competition comes up, the thing that really hits home is that these people that make it this far, they aren't the ones that could afford to get out. That's the thing that really makes me sad when I think about it. The people that are not able to afford to get out, they're still stuck there, living in a war zone. So these people that have made the journey to come here to the point where they're willing to risk, transport in unconventional means and crossing the channel in a dinghy, they're doing that not for fun, not because our system here is so great that we're going to throw loads of money at them like they'd have you believe. It's because they are that desperate. And they were lucky again. They were lucky enough to be able to afford to get out. Some of these people have had to sell every single possession they've ever owned.
And leave their families behind often. And then look at the way that even if they're not directly treated in a discriminatory way, they will still be experiencing discrimination indirectly by the way that people. I don't want to dominate the conversation too much. I want to hear what everyone else has to think. But just, I mean, it comes back as well to the Black Lives Matter movement re-energizing this debate about the way that people basically who are not white are treated in our society, and the structural racism that's there. There's the stuff that's really obvious. Okay, so George Floyd, it was a horrifically obvious way in which he was discriminated against and killed because of the color of his skin. but they are things which are so much more subtle, that must happen every single day to people in our society, just because they happen to have a different kind of skin. It's just, what is wrong with people? What is wrong with us, with our education system, that we don't teach children to not think in this way?
I think that's why also it's so important that we listen to like the Black community when it comes to that, because there's stuff that, like the little things, are stuff that probably none of us even think about because we haven't had to, so we don't notice it. That's why it's so important to listen to the Black community, so we can see the things that they actually face that are just non-issues for us. We're just completely blind to.
Yeah, exactly. Just because you haven't experienced something or you haven't felt something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I think as a man, a white man, there are things that I have never experienced that the women on the call will have experienced, and that doesn't sit right with me either. You know, I've got 2 daughters, and they're going to grow up in a world that I want them to feel safe walking down the street. And unfortunately, because of some other people in this world, there will be instances where they won't feel safe. And you know, this. Speaking about the BLM movement, has really sort of, as we were talking, it's quite a nice contrast when you see the people power that's been put forward here. You know, these are just everyday people that have decided enough is enough. They're going to do something, and that means then that change happens. And if we can take one thing away from this call, and the people at home watching, the people who aren't necessarily political, you know, if you can all take one thing away from this, it's that if you see something that you don't agree with, whatever it is, it can be feeling like you're a business owner that's being unfairly treated, or it can be something incredibly structural like racism, or it can be something that is seemingly so insurmountable that as the climate crisis. If you stand up and say, no, this isn't okay, and I'm going to do something about it, if a 16-year-old girl can do that, then anyone can do that. You know, that's not a criticism of her. She has achieved incredible change on a global scale, to the point where the old white men in suits are scared of her and they're attacking her. And that means, that tells us we know she's winning. The government that we've got in the UK has been so crap on so many levels for so long. Seeing the BLM movement move so quickly, and during a pandemic, during a time where people aren't able to meet up as often or as much as they should, it's forcing us to be a bit creative in how we communicate. Live streams are a great example, video calls, that sort of conferencing, where you can get people from a large difference. It's a real opportunity for us to contrast the two sides. Yeah, you know, that's basically the thing I wanted to get out of this. Was everything's political. You've all got a voice. You can use it if you want to, and I would hope everyone does.
Yeah, and change starts from small beginnings. Nothing big and significant, like Lewis was saying earlier. It has to start from somewhere, and it can start from one person's bedroom, where they decide, you know what, tomorrow or next Thursday, I'm not going to go into school. I'm going to make this placard myself, and I'm going to go and sit. I'm going to make this point to the politicians that I'm not going to go back to school until we've actually addressed this question. You know, that took, I mean, on the one hand, it was something which it wasn't a big deal. But my God, the thunder roar in that small action. And it's like the butterfly effect. Look what's happened as a result of it. But it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't decided to make her placard and to not go into school. It wouldn't have happened.
And I always say as well, like, you know, we talk about social media can be really damaging, and it's, you know, it does a lot of bad. And I think especially now with the pandemic, it's done a lot of good for raising awareness for different issues. So the Black Lives Matter movement, like, for example, TikTok, because, you know, that's what we do. I think the amount of content that I've seen promoting different movements for good, and young people wanting to drive change using Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and things, it's so good. Like, for example, like 10 years ago, nothing like this was happening. And 10 years is not a long time. So the fact that young people are using the platforms that they've got to really push this agenda for change is something that I think it is revolutionary. You know, seeing people who are of school age, who will be voting next year in Wales, using their voices and not holding back, or not thinking that, oh, you know, I can't make a change. I think seeing that kind of 180 all of a sudden, because when I was in school, politics wasn't very, I mean, from my perspective, I'm from Merthyr, and people weren't really very political from my age. It was kind of, but to be fair, it was a boring time in politics. It was, you know, kind of Gordon Brown, no offense to Gordon Brown.
Adam Price wants a word. He was trying to impeach Tony Blair when we were in school, you know.
It wasn't fun, you know. It wasn't like a very politically exciting time. It was, but then, you know, I'd say from probably the referendum in Scotland onwards, things started to get a lot more agitated in politics, and so obvious that I think we couldn't ignore them. So things like Brexit was the big catalyst, I think, and obviously then in 2016 with the American election, people realised, we have to do something. We can't just sit back, because sitting back is what allows bad things to happen. Basically, I know I'm being very, you know, biased, but I think I don't think it's I don't think it's controversial to think Donald Trump being elected was a bad thing.
I agree. It's definitely not controversial. I mean, if anyone finds it controversial, then yeah, I think. I mean, even his supporters would. I mean, for God's sake, no, I agree.
I think it's a sensible thing to say, but I think people I think 2016, when Brexit happened and the US election, I know for me and a lot of people that I know, everyone was like, maybe we should have done more. And
yeah, it was such a shock.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden, I've seen so many people get into politics since then because they want to create a better world. They don't want things to slide backwards. And there's been a lot of upheaval because it's polarized people. But from what I've seen, there's a drive to change things for the better, especially from the younger generations. There's kind of a radicalism there that's really good. It's very grassroots, very inclusive, and that's what we like to see. I mean, that's what
Morgan,
I like to see.
Yeah, that's it. Morgan, before we move on, can I ask Meg and Kat whether you feel the same thing about social media as what Lewis was saying? That obviously that in so many ways it gets a bad press, doesn't it? In terms of the impact that it has on young people, but my God, it can be used for good. I mean, and Meg, you use it for your business as well. But what have been your experiences of that? Do you agree with what Lewis was just saying? So I take over, Morgan. I know I'm not cheering this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I've never really seen Instagram, if we're just talking about Instagram, for example, I've never ever seen it as a bad platform. I've always only really had positive experiences from it. And, you know, if you turned off your Instagram during the Black Lives Matter movement, you would have missed out on so much amazing information, and you would have missed out on the movement, I think, because someone like my mum, she didn't really know what was going on because she didn't know about the Blackout Tuesday because it was just a thing for Instagram. So things like that definitely are powerful. And going back to what Lewis was saying, like my friend's sister's only 14, and I get quite a lot of sort of like my politics updates from her Instagram stories. Like, they're very involved in like what's going on. And when I was her age, like, that was the last thing I was thinking of. I was just thinking, what am I drinking on the weekend? But these young kids are much more involved, and it is really amazing to see. And I do think it's coming from social media.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that social media has been like, it's made such a big impact on how I view politics and stuff, because I do get a lot of the news from social media, I would say. So I think for me, it's definitely like radicalized me in a like, I care so much now about politics. I think it's good in just so many ways. Like, Meg, I saw that your Instagram got deleted when you had so many followers, and I was heartbroken for you because that's such a great way to, you know, grow your business and stuff. And to have that just taken away is so unfair. I'm not sure what happened with it, but I remember reading that you said it was deleted, and I genuinely felt heartbroken for you.
Yeah, it was awful because I put like 5 years of really hard work into try and grow that account, and I got a lot of work from that. So any work that I'd done with S4C or BBC or anything was all from my Instagram page, and Instagram just one day took it down, and I didn't know why because I hadn't actually posted much in like a few weeks. Because I was busy with reopening my business. But when I tried to log in, it said that I was pretending to be someone else. So I'm just very skeptical that people who grow their lives on Instagram, maybe they should look at trying to grow it offline. Oh, well, not on Instagram as well. So obviously using platforms like TikTok, which has been incredibly useful for me.
Definitely.
Can I ask on the subject of social media? We know Lewis was an accidental social media TikTok celebrity. Meg, you seem to be on the other end of the scale. You've gone into social media knowing it's going to benefit your business and it's going to help you grow your profile, and that's how you advertise and it'll help you succeed. Kat, what was your sort of drive for getting into social media, into Welsh nationalist TikTok?
So I'm kind of similar to Lewis, and I had a TikTok for like a while before, and then one day I just made like one TikTok and it was whatever. Then I was like, oh, this is really fun actually, I like doing this. And then I made another TikTok about my experience in America, because basically every time we'd get in a taxi, I'd be with my friends who are from England, and like the taxi driver would be like, oh my gosh, like you're English, right? And then all my friends would be like, yeah, we're English. And I'd be like, no, we're not all English. Some of us actually are Welsh. And my friends would always be like rolling their eyes, and I'd be like, no, it's important, it's very important, the difference. So I made a TikTok about that, and then that like kind of got quite a few views, and then I got a few followers from that, and then it just kind of grew from there. I just really enjoyed making them, and I think doing stuff about things I care about, such as, you know, Wales, that helps, because it helps to make that the like content good, I feel like, because it's actually something I genuinely care about.
So
I think that's probably something that, oh sorry Morgan, it's probably something which I know I need to get on TikTok. I will get on TikTok. I will get on TikTok. But there's no kind of way of hiding authenticity on something like TikTok, because it's so short and to the point that it has to be an authentic thing. And if someone doesn't care about something that they're posting, like whether it's like a humorous thing or something that is really politically motivated or something about their business or a point they really want to get across, they wouldn't go on TikTok unless they really cared, wanted to have an impact. And so that's probably that was probably why they created Twitter in the first place, was to kind of get this really short character count so that you would get these short snappy things out, and then they doubled the character limit so it's not as short and snappy. But TikTok again is forcing people to be concise, and as you can tell, I'm not very good at always being concise, so TikTok is going to be a challenge, but I'm going to try it.
My inner nerd feels needs to correct you just a little bit. Actually, Twitter's count originally was because it was designed so early that the idea was you'd update it via SMS. And then it sort of moved away from that, and it was all online and via the app. That's when the character count grew. But yeah, speaking about things that get you sort of excited and passionate about things, Lewis is very clearly in favour of Welsh independence.
Is he?
You, Delith, are you in favour of Welsh independence?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
It's okay, yeah, why not? Ladies, what about yourselves? Do you think much about the topics? Like I say, we haven't sort of cherry-picked people here that are all going to be towing the line. We want to know what people think and how you feel about certain topics. And I appreciate for a lot of people, independence is only something they've really thought about in the very recent sort of history. Whereas, I'm odd. I was interested in politics at like 13. I was campaigning for Welsh independence and votes at 16 when I was a teenager, or before being a teenager. But I know I'm the odd one in that sort of conversation. Not everyone gets involved into politics without having the thing that gets them interested. Have you thought about sort of social justice and Welsh independence and how the two go hand in hand, or?
I think, well, for Welsh independence for me, I think before Scotland had their referendum, I don't think it was ever something I just ever thought would happen, kind of thing. It just was, it seemed impossible. But since that, and since kind of support for it has grown, it's definitely something that I want. I'm all for Welsh independence. I think it is the best thing for the country. I'm not sure how soon it can happen just because support isn't quite where it needs to be, but I think coronavirus has definitely, I think it's given it a big boost because we've seen how Wales can work kind of independently from England, because we've had different strategies. Like Boris hasn't been in charge of Wales when it comes to what we're doing with coronavirus. So I think that has been really important to show that Wales can, you know, function when we're in charge of ourselves.
I think for me, like you said, I'm not like majorly into politics or anything like that. And I think if you could say to me, would I want Indie Wales or not, without knowing any facts, I actually like the sound of that idea. You know, I speak Welsh. My mum's career has always been in the Welsh language, and you know, we're quite patriotic and we love being Welsh. So it does sound like a great idea. However, I don't think I know enough to know whether there would be enough support. For example, you know, obviously I'd run my own business, so I don't know enough to be able to say, yeah, I definitely want to do that, or I don't want to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. I think that the word independence and the concept even is something which, for lots of people, is going to be it's going to be either a remote prospect, maybe less so now since the COVID-19 crisis, but either remote or something which is remote in time, and that they think that just like, you know, there are more important things to deal with. Independence is a luxury. I think that for me, and I think I'm far from being alone in this. For me, independence isn't the end of any journey, it's the beginning of the journey, because I see so many injustices in the way that our society works, and I think that the only way of fixing those and of actually making our society fairer is making sure that decisions affecting us are made as close to home as possible. So for me, it's never been like an anti-England thing at all. And I think that it's very easy to characterize it as an anti-England thing, but it's not that. Oh my God, I really love England. I lived there for nearly 10 years. But I think that most people living in any country like the idea of decisions affecting their lives being made as close to them as possible. I think the people in Wales for so long have had this inferiority complex drilled into us about whether or not we are able to do it. And so it's totally understandable why there are so many questions that people will have. But I think that ultimately there are very, very, very many countries in the world that are smaller than us in terms of population size, in terms of geographic mass, that are able to function independently. There's nothing intrinsic about the fact that we are as we are and that we are a poor nation. We've got so much potential. But again, if we want independence, I think we need to say why it is that we want to govern ourselves, and we want things to be done differently. We want to be able to help businesses like Meg's business. We want to be able to make sure that the injustices we've seen in recent months with the COVID crisis wouldn't happen in an independent Wales. And I think that it only becomes real for people if we talk about what the real impact on people's lives would be. Because if it is, I respect it for some people that they do just want independence for independence sake. I totally respect that. It's just that's not why I want it. I want it because it is intrinsically about making life fairer.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that. Oh, sorry. Do you want to?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that's such a good point, and something I think that's made me think, and I'm probably going to try and take that on board for maybe some more TikToks to kind of explain why independence is so important to me. Because I kind of make jokes about it without really explaining it on TikTok, because I understand why I want it, but I don't really think about everyone else doesn't understand why I want it. So I think the fact that independence is important for the future of the people in Wales, not just independence for the sake of independence, that's something I'm going to think about when I make more TikToks about it. I think about trying to explain that more.
Please send them to me. Amazing.
Thing is, I think with with independence, like you were just saying, it's independence for the sake of independence is very much an abstract concept. And with Brexit, Brexit means Brexit, as we were plagued with for years. There was no forward planning. There was no actual idea of what this was. It was just some kind of concept that people had. And for me, independence, we need to make sure that we have a clear plan, why we're doing it, why we want to do it, what we'll get out of it with tangible evidence. And I think you've brought it up before, Delith, about a constitutional convention, about, we need that forward planning, because at the end of the day, Westminster has failed Wales for a long time. And the decisions that are being made for Wales are not in our best interests. And those failings, the reason for independence, I tell people, the reason for independence is that we want to be able to actually, look at Tidal Lagoon, for example. We want to actually be able to make the decisions that will benefit the people that live here, and be in our best interests. And that's all it is. It's not about, hating England, or it's like, for example, Scandinavia. You've got Norway, Denmark, Sweden. They're all independent countries, but they work really closely together. And that's the kind of relationship I'd like to see with British Isles. Because, the lovely people in all the countries, I think it doesn't make sense for our neighbours to be telling us what we can and what we can't do, because we know that doesn't work, and it never has for any country.
Appropriate Adam Price quote here. No country has ever been run well by a country 150 miles to the east. They never have, and they never bloody will. For those of you who didn't go to the first All Under One banner march in Cardiff, it's my happy place in my head. Whenever the day gets a bit tough, I sort of want to drift off in my head for a few minutes. I go back to that march. How surprising it was that, for people who have been pro-Welsh indie for a long time, and I say for more than 15 years or so, their opinion is they want it because they know why they want it. Like yourself, Catherine, they know why, but those around them aren't necessarily thinking the same way. So what happened on that day was, for some of us that were there early, setting up and making sure everything was ready for our little group of people to make sure we were all happy and together and safe. People turned up, and then buses turned up, and then more buses turned up, and then more buses turned up. And before you know it, the buses didn't stop coming. It was time to go. There were still buses unloading people. We were expecting a couple of hundred people, and it was nearly 3,000 people. For the emotion around independence, for a lot of people who have felt it's the right thing for so long, it was like the penny had dropped with some people. Wales was waking up. Rising, rejecting second-class status. Again, to quote Adam, that speech, if you haven't listened to it, you need to just go and feel it, feel the emotion. Lewis wants to jump in.
Talking of speeches, I mean, I've got to say, Delith's speech in the Merthyr March last September is the best speech that I've ever heard, and I did cry. So you say the Cardiff is your house. I mean, I'm from Merthyr, so I'm biased anyway. But when Delith spoke in the Red House, I've watched it back so many times, and I've sent it to friends. Like the ones who are indie curious, I'm like, listen to this, and it is the best speech. So I want to say thank you to Delith.
God, thank you.
No, honestly, you encompassed what it means to support independence, and what it means, especially for people like me from the valleys, from working class backgrounds, traditionally Labour heartlands. It really sums it up. And if someone could just post a link to the speech in the comments, that'd be great. Thank you.
I want to watch it. I'm definitely going to check that out now.
I am not paying Lewis to say this, I promise. Because I didn't mean to shout the end of the speech, but because I was so caught up in the moment that I just ended up shouting it, I lost my voice for nearly 2 weeks. I couldn't get it.
So jump in a second, because speaking of Labour heartlands, we've got the Prince of Welsh TikTok joining us. Catherine has to leave in about 5 minutes or so, so let's get him in.
I do.
Hello. Extra lovely face.
I can be closer. Hi, Robbie.
You've got to introduce yourself, plug your socials, and tell us 3 things about yourself. 3 words to describe yourself.
the message. Bear with. Right, here we go. Hiya, close up. Hiya, I'm Dennis Lloyd Jones. I'm 22. I'm from the Rhondda. 3 things about myself. I've got to describe myself or just random 3 things?
Use 3 words to describe yourself.
Right, okay.
Or 4.
4, right, calm down. Bubbly, in Welsh, Heilog. I've been called Heilog, and that's nice. And well,
the best thing is your signal dropped out twice then as we said those 2 words.
So what did we get now? Did we get bubbly?
Nothing.
We got Heilog.
Haylog, yeah, I got Haylog.
Let's go for Heilog. My signal is
Oh,
rubbish.
Lovely. Well, you've joined us in the middle of a bit of a reminiscent, happy place. We were talking about the Welsh independence rallies and Welsh independence in general. Obviously, you are pro Wales in your TikToks, Ellis. Are you pro independence or are you more indie curious along the lines of Meg?
I'd say I'm quite indie curious. I talk about it now and then. But yeah, it's just the thing is, I don't really know much about it, so I usually don't like to talk. Usually, when it comes to politics and stuff like that, I usually decide not to speak about it if I don't know enough about it or have enough to back me up. So I'd have to say I'm indie curious because I don't know much about it, but I've heard a few positives about it.
Well, that's funny because you weren't here for the first half of the call, but we talked a lot about how lots of people feel that way, and it's totally normal to feel like you don't want to speak up in case you say something that's not right. There's no wrong answer when it comes to politics. You know, how you feel about a subject is personal to you.
And the politics is personal. It has to be.
Yeah, everything's political, whether it's dog mess on the street or which play park you're going to go in, or having trouble with antisocial behaviour, or whether it's something important like the business that you run needing support, or the social media platform that you're a star on being shut down in an entire continent, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So well, welcome to the conversation. I know, Kat, just let us know when you've got to shoot off, and we'll say our goodbyes.
Okie dokie, I think it'll be in about a minute. I'll have to go.
Cool. Well, there we go. Before you go then, we'll challenge you to be the first person to answer the question that was set to you before the call. I hope you remember, I hope you were prepared an answer. So,
I think I did.
Yeah, just scrolling up in here to say, so before you all go, you will be asked the same question, which is, if you were First Minister of an independent Wales, you could do literally anything, what would it be and why?
I think it would be, I'm not sure specifically, but I know it would be something to do with the Welsh language, like upping support for it, just making it so it's something that, more people care about. I know there's a lot of people who care very passionately for it. I'm one of them. But for example, I went to a Welsh school, so I did everything in Welsh. But all of my friends who went to English schools, their relationship with the Welsh language isn't great because the lessons they're given don't really teach them it. It teaches them the very base level basics, so they can't fall in love with it in the same way that, say, I can because I went to a Welsh school. And I think just making the Welsh language cool, because in secondary school, the first few years, it's like, I don't want to speak Welsh, that's not cool, I'm going to speak English in school, you can't stop me. But then every single one of my friends, as we've left school, we love the Welsh language now. We try and speak it together when we're together, because we want to keep it alive. We have that passion for it. I think anything that they could do to get that passion for younger people in year 7, 8 and 9, and also people who go to English speaking schools, something to do with that. I'm not sure what exactly, but I know it would be to do with the Welsh language.
Epic. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and join us for today on a really nice day. If you're anything like me, you're probably glad to be inside next to a fan looking outside. Brilliant, and we appreciate you. And what we'll do at the end, we'll plug everyone's TikToks again, so I'll copy your username into the chat, and hopefully we can all get some more followers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay,
Yeah,
I just pressed the leave button. Thank you.
Bye.
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 So back to 5, the odd number. So
Fab five.
there's a couple of us that are odd here, at least me and Lewis. So we sort of lost our track now.
And I was waiting for Lewis's reaction to that. It was a delayed reaction, but we got it.
That was a delayed reaction. It's a warm day.
Yeah.
No, but sorry, Morgan. I keep doing this. By the way, I keep interrupting Alice. You've missed me interrupting Morgan the whole time. But you were saying about how that for you feel more comfortable saying you're anti-curious, but that you don't feel that there's enough that you know to be able to come out fully in favour on one side or the other. Yeah, I mean, obviously in politics it would be better generally if so many politicians were kind of better informed about things before they spoke about stuff. So I'm not in any way going to say, oh no, say something even if you don't understand it. But I think one of the points that we've been making the first half of the call was that actually politics is something that young people need to shape, and that there's so much of an idea that politics is reserved for people who are at a certain stage of life and that they've got XYZ experience, and so they are the ones who have a right to have the opinions or to say things. Actually, no, we need young people to shape things up. And so this isn't like me saying, so that means that you need to come out in support of X, Y, or Z. No, not at all. It's just your opinion is just as valid as anyone else's opinion, and it needs to help shape what we do. So that sounded a bit more like a rant than anything, but I was trying to be helpful, but apparently it came across as a bit aggressive. So sorry about that.
Passionate. So we'll sort of cycle back through all the conversations and just do a quick run through at the end. But we were talking about social justice and independence and how sort of the world is in flux, and coronavirus is a big thing that has highlighted the best and the worst about the world that we live in. So, education and employment, mental health, how will our generation end up suffering the biggest brunt of the pandemic? If people, if you guys can think about how already it's impacted you guys, Meg, you're a great example of, unfortunately, someone who's been hit quite hard by this. Who's
been hit hard, but has also, because of how hard she's worked, is kind of fighting back because of it too, in spite of it.
Yeah. Like I say, with independence and what's happening, the flux, the change that's happening now. Wales is sort of on the march, and there is Morgan Cruz put it in the comments. There's a big indie curious feeling in the valleys. Feeling left behind. Lewis being from the Rhondda. And Ellis from the Rhondda as well. Merthyr, sorry, Lewis. Merthyr.
You can't mix them up, Morgan. No.
No, I'm from the Breed, right? And I get told all the time I'm not from the Rhondda. It doesn't. It's really like elitist there. I think they're very protective about who is allowed to claim to be from the Rhondda.
My grandfather was from the Rhondda, so I'm allowed a little tiny bit, but I'm from the Rhymney Valley. But yeah. So I just cover all the valleys. Sorry, Morgan.
Sorry. Changes in the air, and this reminds us that change is possible. So how can we realise that change? How can we think about the Wales that we want to see? So for me, it's an independent Wales, above all else, because everything else that I want, when you trickle down to it, relies on the ability to make those changes, the control over the levers to make the changes in government that at the moment rely on that parliament 150 miles away in the capital of the country next door. We don't have the ability to overrule that parliament, even if a large portion of the rest of the country combined work together. We wouldn't have a big enough say to overrule the majority in England. And that, for me, means you can't achieve anything that you want to do without their ascension, without their approval, their say-so. Well, that's not okay. If people in Wales want to make a change for the better, then they should be allowed to, regardless of what the country next door say. So that's why I want independence, because I care about the rights of other people, and I care about the future for my children. I care about the students that are about to receive really shoddy exam results because it's out of their control. You know, education is a great example of something that actually it's devolved, and Wales could already make big changes to fix the problems that we've got.
Yeah, but this is the thing, and I think that there's often the lines get blurred between what an independent Wales could do, or even, do you know what? Again, I'm going to be political just for a second, but even the current settlement, just with a different party in government, the lines get blurred because it's been the same party in government for the entirety of the history of our parliament or our assembly as it was before, and that's nothing, you know. Well, you will hear me criticizing that party often, but actually this intrinsically isn't anything about that party. I just think it is unhealthy for democracy for one party to be in power the whole time. I mean, and you can say in that case, it's not that party's fault that they've been in power. Of course, they want to win elections. There are things that we need to do more as the other parties, but yes, just because things are devolved doesn't mean that the way that things are being run now is the only way that they could be run. Things can be different. And obviously, if you have certain things that are devolved, but then other things, which other funding streams for those same areas not being devolved, then it's going to be a lot more complicated. Why, like Lewis was saying earlier, why should we have to ask permission from a neighbouring country to do is something that we want to do to help the people who live here? I mean, it just, if aliens came to Earth and you tried to explain the system to them, they wouldn't understand it.
Thing is, independence, like Dallas said earlier, independence is about the future because it's about change. And for me, it is just the beginning because, like I said, there's a lot of failings from Westminster that really impact us really badly, and they impact the most vulnerable people in society. So for me, I want independence because I want us to be able to create a Wales that is outward looking, that is inclusive, and that works for everyone who lives here. So for example, you know, a Wales that treats trans and non-binary people amazingly, that, you know, that there is no discrimination, that there are gender clinics, and there is access to fit for purpose trans healthcare. Because you know, there's a lot of things going on in Westminster at the moment with the with trans issues and stuff that it's just not fit for purpose. And you know, likewise with LGBT, other LGBT rights and people of colour, I want us to be able to create a country, a society that really is caring about each other, and there is that legislation in place in an independent Wales that makes sure that no one misses out. Like we touched on earlier about, you know, just because you're born into a certain position doesn't mean that you are born into poverty. If you're born and you are trans, it doesn't mean that you're going to be disadvantaged the rest of your life. I mean, this is me getting on my soapbox a bit now. Sounds like I'm making a political pitch, and I am, but that's what it is for me. Is that independence is an opportunity. It's not a destination, but it's the opportunity to create that society that works for every single person that lives within it.
Absolutely, it's a catalyst for change, isn't it? And because I think there would be very little point in having an independent Wales that did things exactly the same. I mean, exactly. You know, then you've won the argument without actually changing any of the things that made the argument wrong in the first place. And again, I respect that there will be some people who disagree with me on this, who genuinely really feel that independence for independence sake is the only thing that matters. Good luck to them. And I get the argument, but it's not something that I agree with, because there's no point in fighting for a change if that change isn't going to make things better. And I'm a socialist as well as being a nationalist. For me, if we're not helping the most vulnerable people in society, then society isn't functioning.
100%. Agree completely.
We've got a bit of a saying, the indie first lot. You know, they have their own visions of what Wales looks like after independence, but they don't want to distract or detract from the message of pro-independence. They feel we'll get independence first and then we'll solve all that other stuff afterwards. But they forget that all that other stuff sometimes can be as important as people's lives. You know, it can be about the most important things to people. The reason why those people want to be involved in the indie movement, they want independence, is for their lives to be better, because they've got something that is so particularly important to them. They know the only way they can fix it is through independence. And sometimes there's ways and means of being able to act in certain ways independence beforehand. And it's almost like, you know, why are we wasting the opportunity of being the change that we want to see? One of those things we were talking about earlier on, education, is a great one, because we could already influence that, but we need to be in power for that. So if you're a pro-independence person, regardless of what party you follow, but you want independence, nothing's going to change unless there's a pro-independence party in power in the Senate. And that means, unfortunately, regardless of all of the fantastic support for the indie movement that groups like Labour for Indie Wales are delivering, and shout out to Ben, because, you know, he is the sort of person that I ask him, why are you still where you are? You're in a party that's a unionist party that has been in power for so long and failed for so long. How can we achieve the change that you want to see and that I want to see and that we all want to see, without having a pro-independence party in power in the Bay? We can't. So I'm just going to, my turn to be on a soapbox now, Lewis. If we're all on board for the independence message, and we want an independent Wales, the only way we're going to even get the chance to have that is with a pro-independence party. But meanwhile, while we're going on that journey, if we have a pro-independence party in power in Cardiff Bay, we can also deliver some real positive change with the powers that we've already got while we're waiting, while we're getting there. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously that there needs to be, it's a healthy thing that there's a plurality of voices who are calling for that. And and I'm glad that groups like Labour for Indie Wales exist. And also I'm glad that there are people who, you know, are all for independence without feeling affiliated to any one political party. That's great. And that the All Under One Banner marches are all under one banner. And yet, you know, we are obviously, I'm a Plaid Cymru politician, so I would say, wouldn't I? But we're only going to have that change if a party that actually has a manifesto commitment to delivering that change is there. But it's healthy for a democracy too, for there to be a change of government.
And we need to
change the subject a little bit to move away from the very overpowering topic of independence that, you know, for some people who aren't as dedicated as me and Lewis and Dennis, may be a bit off-putting initially, or scary, because it's an
overpowering topic. It's an overwhelming thing, and like we said, it can seem very remote. And yeah,
I want to ask a question of everyone, and the first person to answer I would like to be Meg, if that's all right.
Oh, great.
Why do you think there aren't enough opportunities for people to stay in Wales? So before you answer that, quick show of hands, who went to university? Not me. How many of you who went to university went away to university, didn't stay in Wales? So this isn't going to work then. That's fine. I was hoping that
I do have a good argument, which is kind of taking away my answer for if I was going to be First Minister. But can I speak about it now?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. Well, for me anyway, so I went to uni in South Wales and I wanted to get into the fashion industry. My degree was in business management, but I was like, okay, my interest is in fashion and things like that, and I want to get into fashion industry. So I worked in the only headquarters in Cardiff that was fashion, and I won't name any names, but it just wasn't a very good place to work. I think they felt like they had monopoly, so they could take advantage of the people who work there, because they were people who wanted to work in the fashion industry and didn't want to go to London, so that they could kind of keep them there. So I left that job and actually went to work in the steelworks. I think that is just such a good sort of example of how people don't want to stay in Wales or Cardiff because it's not cool. The industries that are here are kind of like not cool. they're not cool. So I thought the only way I'm going to get back into the fashion industry and stay in Wales is if I set up my own business. And that's kind of like what I've done. And for me, if I was First Minister, I would try and get like better sort of industries in South Wales, so people don't have to go to London and go and work in fashion or design, any sort of professions like that. It's kind of like really, really difficult to stay in Cardiff. I'm saying Cardiff because I'm from Cardiff, and do those jobs. There's not many. None of my friends really work in a position that they actually would love to work in, because we've kind of got very heavy industrial industries in South Wales, and someone who, I didn't do fashion in uni because I just thought I wanted to be something a bit more broad, but that is exactly where I wanted to work. And, I was looking for jobs in London. I was thinking, I don't want to go to London. I want to stay here. So I do think we definitely need to do more to get businesses set up in Wales, and that people would actually want to come here to work for those companies as well. I know it's kind of like, sounds quite narrow, but that's kind of like what my experience of leaving university and going into the workplace was like. It was either industrial or London.
So perfect. You hit the nail on the head there, because that was what I was getting at was, we've got a bit of a brain drain. People quite often will go away to university and they won't feel that there's enough to bring them back to Wales. I didn't go to university, but I did go to London for 2 years to work for a large company in their head office in London, because I felt like there wasn't that opportunity for me to progress in a company and to get that exposure to business and to promote myself, to get a decent enough job to be able to provide for my family by staying in Wales. Before my eldest daughter was born, I was planning on going into the military. And again, that's another thing that is a big drive for some people, is like they feel like that's the only obvious way of getting yourself. Be the best is a big slogan. Well, yeah, but you're not. You're just doing another job. And when you go to places like London, you feel like you made it just because you're being there. And then you realize, actually, this is just as rubbish as it is in Cardiff, but it's a different company above the door. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was things about London that were great. You could get up at 2 a.m, go to the cinema if you wanted to, because that was available to you. But that's everything.
Yeah, but I have to just stay in the same room always as with. Oh, don't get me started. But I mean, I loved living in London in so many ways when I was there, but it is not a sustainable thing. It's like the rent there is just astronomical, and you get this box of a space. You're not able to save a single thing. I loved living there while I did, but I got so fed up of it by the end. My God.
The renting and housing, that we'll come on to that in a minute, because there's another question after this about specifically, are there enough jobs and affordable housing in our communities to keep people here as well? That's sort of a follow-on. You're shaking your head, Lewis. I completely agree with you. It's Delith, your point though about London, and I like to sort of tell people this whenever I can. There's a song by Baz Luhrmann, I think, called "Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen." It's a bit of an old song, bit of a quirky song. The lyrics are fantastic. It's basically.
Can you sing it? I don't know it.
I'm not going to sing it, but I'll tell you.
Why?
Basically, he's speaking over a track, and he's giving a chat to like a graduating class of a university, and it's set in America. So he's saying, everybody should go and live in New York, but leave before it makes you too hard. And everyone should go and live in California, but leave before it makes you too soft. And it's a bit like that in the UK. Everyone should probably go and live in London for a bit and experience it, but leave before it swallows you up and makes you a tough individual. Or go to somewhere that's a bit more relaxed and libertarian, like Brighton, but again, leave before it makes you too relaxed. Experience both ends of the scale, and then come back to Wales and live your life. Go to university wherever you feel, but.
Or is this part of the problem that the idea is, oh yes, people should. Oh, so Sarah, you know this song. Someone needs to sing this song to me. I don't know it, or send me the link to it. Is this part of the problem though? This idea that like, oh yeah, everyone does need to go and live in London or somewhere like that. Like, why do we have? I mean, surely that's kind of part of the psyche that people have, because so many TV shows that we all grow up with has the young people in their 20s living in London, just like in the States, people, well, I'm showing my age now, they grew up with Friends, where there was a group of 20-somethings living in New York. I mean, I know that we're getting off topic of what you wanted to ask us about university, Morgan, so I'm going to let you come back in because I keep on shifting the conversation.
Oh,
So no, I'm being good now.
Now, we'll go back to the original question though about you know, the issue is I've lost my place in my list of questions.
It was about the brain drain you were going to ask, wasn't it? About how
why aren't there enough opportunities for people to want to stay in Wales? So,
what was the point that you were going to make when, if there was someone other than me who'd gone away to university?
Well, it was more that I was hoping that people had gone away to other parts of the UK and came back. And unfortunately, the other three guests we've got here have all gone to university and then in Wales and stayed in Wales because of the same reasons people go away to English universities and end up staying in England, just because you make friends, you get jobs, you move on. The exception to this, I suppose, is Catherine, who went to America, then came back, you know. So
I've got an opinion. It's kind of it's not really on the same top, but basically, I've got kind of a similar kind of thoughts on within Wales, people moving from their towns to Cardiff or Swansea or Newport, because there aren't, not because they feel there aren't, but there actually aren't the opportunities there for them. So for example, I'm from Merthyr, but I moved to Cardiff to go to uni and I stayed in Cardiff because there were no jobs in Merthyr. And I think this is a big issue with Fro Cymreig, so speaking about Welsh language, a lot of people in the Welsh heartlands, Welsh-speaking heartlands, are moving down to the cities, or mainly Cardiff, because the opportunities aren't there. And the problem is Wales is becoming too centralised. It's becoming like a mini UK, begrudgingly say, because everything is too centralised in the south. And I think this, I mean, it kind of ties into the same thing, but a lot of the opportunities that are in Wales are only in Cardiff or the surrounding areas, and it's kind of ruining small communities then, or it's disintegrating small communities, and then this kind of plays into the whole second homes thing then, because people are moving away, and then it's kind of people can't stay where they grew up, or they feel like they need to leave. And I guess it's on the same topic, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely, it feeds right into the comments about affordable homes in our communities, because you will find second homes in places like Gwynedd being bought up and out. You know, the market just isn't there to sustain that. So the value of homes go up, and people feel quite rightly that they're allowed to sell their homes to whoever they want to. So why shouldn't they sell it to whoever can pay the most, rather than your friend's son or daughter that wants to stay where they grew up? Because at the end of the day, you know, it's your property, your house, you do what you want with it, but it doesn't mean that it's okay for people then to feel priced out of their own communities. You know, if the work was there in those communities to begin with, there'd be a justification for them to afford that house, or to try and afford that house in the community they live. But if they can't, if they have to move to Cardiff, they can't afford to buy one house in Cardiff, let alone a house in Cardiff and a house in West Wales or North Wales, where they are from. You know, if it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, a cycle that gets worse every time it revolves. We've got a comment here. I just want to revert to some of the people who are watching. Some great comments about education from Jade, where she was saying she wanted to do games design, but was told by a college lecturer and uni lecturer, if I didn't want to leave Wales, I shouldn't do the course. You know, that in itself isn't true. We've got one of the most exciting up-and-coming games development companies in Bridgend, Pencoed, in the office where I work at the moment. Yeah, developing some real top-flight, really unique games with a Welsh spin on it. You know, those companies do exist, but people are being told through ignorance that they shouldn't do a course because it's not going to be possible to succeed in that industry. I feel quite sad for Jade to feel maybe she felt like she was put off from doing.
Sorry, I just want to say Jade is really talented. I know Jade, and she's an asset to Wales. So.
I'm glad she's still here, hopefully. Another one, Sam. So I moved from Abu Dhabi to Florida with my family in 2008. And this year I'm returning to Wales with my now American wife, who's coming to Wales for university.
Oh,
I know Sam. Sam is a great guy that I play a couple online games with sometimes. You know, and this is the sort of thing. This is the the people that are coming back to Wales afterwards, after doing something like university moving away, they're going to bring with them a wealth of knowledge and experience that I've got no problem with people feeling like for university or something, they don't want to stay in Wales, they want to go to other universities. As long as we can attract them back so they can bring that experience with them. On Lewis's point, whenever we were in school, it was very Welsh-speaking jobs are in Cardiff, so I think that pushed a lot of people to go to Cardiff as well. She's appreciative of you. Wales Interactive, for anyone who's wondering what the games company I was on about. Yeah, you know, this is the thing. There are lots of things, but Lewis, you're absolutely right. The replication or the emulation of the British state on a shrunk down scale, where everything's sort of being concentrated in the southeast, it's not great. It's not sustainable long term either. So we do need to do something substantial, something big. You know, Sarah, who lives up north, says, I don't want to be stuck in a dead-end seasonal job. That's why I went to uni and try to not be stuck in a poorly paid job. But like Morgan Crew said, it's hard due to the very little industry and the companies that we've got. And absolutely right. You know, Morgan Crews is from the Rhondda. Every big factory that I know in that area is gone now. I can't think. I'm trying to think. You know, where I work, a big company in 2012-ish, I thought it went under. I thought it left Wales for good. So when I got into there, I was genuinely surprised that this business still exists. A lot of it isn't necessarily that it's difficult or it's hard. It's that the knowledge isn't there. People aren't aware of what's around them sometimes.
But I mean, and I think that there are two different strands to this. That in the valleys, so my grandfather liked to speak about a story that something that happened. I think it was in, I'm going to say 1956, that he knew the person in charge of the labour exchange in Ebbw Vale. So and that man knew every single person in Ebbw Vale who was out of a job. And there was something like 45 of them. You know, it was a very small, specific number, and most of those people were too physically unwell to be able to walk to get a job. Those jobs just don't exist in the valleys anymore. It's not that people living in the valleys are feckless or that they don't want jobs. It's just that industry was just taken away almost overnight, and that, you know, so people leaving school, if they left school at 16, then there were factories where they could have gone to work, or there were industries in their communities where there were obvious routes of progression, and then overnight they just disappeared. And yeah, understandably, almost everyone, you know, who wants to get a job will feel that they have to move away in order to get those jobs. Now, Morgan, you're saying that something needs to change. I agree. There are loads of things that have to change. And Morgan Cruz is saying in the last week or so, we had large food supply go into liquidation just 5 minutes from we need a green industry for the valleys for the future. I absolutely agree. We have to have a green revolution for this. We need to have a South Wales metro that isn't just making us a large commuter belt for Cardiff. We need to be interconnecting our communities in the valleys too, and we need investment. But, you know, there's some things I think that have changed in the past few months in terms of, for some people, it has been very easy to work from home. And I think that for some companies, they've realized or been forced to realize that it is possible for people to work from home. They don't have to physically be in an office in order to do that. And I hope that that's one of the things that we keep from our experience over the crisis, that actually people should be able to work either from home or in hubs that are closer to home, rather than having to move to where the jobs are. Obviously, that's only going to be true for certain types of jobs. And one of the inequalities that we've seen is that for some people, the lockdown has been an inconvenience and, you know, very difficult and isolating, but very manageable. Whereas for other people who were not able to work from home, then it has been a real crisis point. So, I mean, I think that for the people who are able to work from home or closer to home, or I know that working from home doesn't suit everyone and it's not always a nice environment, but if it's possible to not have to physically all be in the same space, that's something that we should keep. I think, what do you agree? I mean, I'm saying this as though that is just the gospel truth. please tell me, like, Meg, what's your take on that? Because I know that actually you actually experienced this. So please tell me if you think that I'm wrong in that.
No, I definitely think like working from home is the future. One of the reasons I quit my job is because I couldn't work in an office. I'm very loud and I like to talk to people, and I never fit in an office environment. But I was hardworking. But sometimes people would take it for granted because I'd be chatting for maybe like half an hour, but I would stay a little bit later, or I would do something at my own time. And like I do feel like even my friend, she works for quite a large company, and she never thought she'd be able to move. And she's thinking now, well, I could actually move back to West Wales and work from home, which is fantastic, I think. And if I ever do recruit people in the future, I honestly don't care where they work in, as long as that I can see that they're putting the work in and doing everything they need to do. It doesn't really bother me. I would like to meet them one day, but yeah, if they wanted to work from home indefinitely, that wouldn't be an issue to me. And I think going forward, the younger the companies are, the more that this will be normal, I think. I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I was going to try and segue back to you, Meg, just because we're talking about the industries that have left our communities, and how do we attract more people to stay where they grew up and in the communities that they want to sort of raise their own family in. And I was going to suggest, kind of sort of jump the queue a bit and say my thing that I would do if I was First Minister would be to introduce some sort of platform to enable people to start their own businesses through long-term loans. That means they haven't got to have that financial worry for the short term. They have the capacity and the time to start their own business up and get it going, because we know that companies that form in the communities stay in the communities. And if you were from somewhere like Gwynedd or Abu Dhabi, or somewhere down west, Preseli, you're gonna set your business up, you're gonna stay there. You're not gonna uproot your business and everything else to Cardiff or to London, because why would you? You're the person that makes that decision, and you'll hire people then from your community as well, and you'll become that employer. And I think I really wish you all the best with your business, Meg. I really hope that you succeed and continue to succeed, so you can become that big employer and stay in your community and help. And I think more and more people absolutely should be doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I can't remember exactly where he's from, but there's this company who I've been dealing with because I'm on the NatWest Accelerator course, which helps lots of entrepreneurs come together. And he's in West Wales. And so sometimes when he tells clients where he's based, they can't believe it because he's running such a successful business just from his garage where he actually employs people, but they're all working from home. And he's doing really, really, really well. But yeah, he will never move. He's super happy over there. It's probably cheaper to live over there, well, just up the road really. But yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of university degrees that say Cardiff put on, or kind of Met or University of South Wales. But then there's no jobs for those people to go into in Wales. For example, like the fashion design, for example, there's only one really HQ, and it's debatable whether it's fashion in South Wales. And those people went to uni here. They might actually love Cardiff or love Wales, but they have to go back because that's their passion is not in Wales anymore because there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, so I say we are already nearly over three quarters of the way through, and we haven't actually heard anything from the Prince of Welsh TikTok other than his welcome. So what do you think, Alice? Why aren't there enough opportunities for people to want to stay in Wales? And do we have a brain drain? And are there enough jobs and affordable homes in the communities that we live in? Go.
20 questions. Well, I think, obviously, with me being in Cardiff University and I'm studying Welsh, I just want to see it as with me, there's many opportunities for me to use my degree for when I pass, because we're in Wales, the Welsh language is here. I don't know much about with stuff for instance, my friend, she went to Winchester University, a forensic science, so I know that she's been struggling to find jobs in Wales to do with forensics, so she might have to go to places like England to do so, which is a bit gutting to see because she really likes living in Wales. So that next year or so she'll be able to live in Cardiff, hoping that Cardiff, but she's struggling to find it. So, but I know there's probably stuff like that somewhere in regards to forensics, but obviously it's just how to find it. I think that's one thing that we need is a way to be able to help people find these things. Like we need to highlight that there are jobs for forensic scientists. There are, you know, just so that there is whatever England's got, we've got it. But you know, and like Lewis was saying earlier about how people within Wales, they feel like they need to go to Cardiff to find the good jobs and stuff like that. That made me think about it's the same with the Welsh language. Is that I remember in school, it's like Catherine was saying earlier, when I was in school, the Welsh language, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to need it. You know, it's useless. 4 years later, here I am. I think that when you're down in the valleys, there's not a lot of opportunity for the Welsh. So I think, and I've basically thought this as well, is that if I want to get somewhere in life, I have to go to Cardiff, or like maybe North Wales or West Wales, where there's more Welsh just to succeed. But I have found that there are many like Welsh businesses and ways for me to use my Welsh when I'm back home, but they are not as, I wouldn't be achieving as much if I was working in somewhere in Cardiff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I say the big point of this topic was to try and identify things that were personal to individuals and also then in turn political, because we started the conversation off by saying there's a lot of things that people feel like, oh, I can't really talk about politics because I don't understand enough. As you said yourself, you like to sort of shy away from the conversations you don't know the answers to, and that's totally normal. The worry is that people need to realize everything's political, absolutely everything. And, you know, a big thing for a lot of people in the Rhondda, we were talking at the beginning, is, you know, climate change has had a big effect on some of the communities in the Rhondda because of the flooding that's happened again now, you know, and for a lot of people, that's quite rightly made them angry and they feel unfairly treated. But then that politicizes them because the safety of them and their families and their homes is a political issue. Someone somewhere in politics is responsible for that. And
yeah,
you know,
and someone somewhere has either decided something or decided not to do something, which has had a material impact on those people's lives. And almost all the things that affect us are the results of decisions or a failure to make a decision.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you were saying. And one thing with me now about how I was saying I'm very political. The reason why I decided to come on here is that I am now deciding to put myself into politics a little bit. And I think the thing that made me decide that was definitely the Black Lives Movement, because that is basically based on politics and like the stuff that's happened. So I thought when that was happening, I tried to put myself, you know, get myself involved, try to use my privilege to give voices to like Black lives. But yeah, to that, and then also about what happened, like I was said earlier, with Westminster and what they're saying about trans lives. Now, with that, I was thinking as well about how, you know, Black Lives Matters and the trans rights movements, all of these are we're just trying to like, have like, human rights, and it's the same with like stuff with like Stonewall, like how we were fighting to get our rights and stuff. And that's all basically politics. And with me being like, obviously, something might happen in life that will affect me due to, like you said, someone's decision in Parliament. So I need to like do my research. I need to get involved, just so that, yeah, I'm getting somewhere.
But your voice is part of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I need to like put my voice in it, say what I feel, and yeah. I
always say that we can't afford to not be political, and this might, I wouldn't say offend people, but it might ruffle some feathers when I say when people tell me I'm apolitical. To me, what I hear is that I'm privileged enough not to need to change much because do you know what I mean? Whereas for a lot of people, politics, like we said, is an everyday issue because you're trying to fight something that's pushing you down, whether it's trans rights, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's a feminist issue. Do you know what I mean? We can't afford not to be political, because to not be political and push for change is to be complicit in the force that is oppressing people. And that's why I say we have to embrace politics so we can change things for better.
And I think that I agree with you definitely on that, but I think that it's also not people's fault for feeling at first that that they don't know where to start in order to get into politics. Because and when I say getting into politics, like taking part in stuff like this, like watching stuff like this, being part of conversation, getting your voice heard, because it can be really off-putting. And I think that, again, they're faults with our education system. We should taught more of this stuff in school, and then it wouldn't see. And I'm hoping that that's changing with things like the climate emergency. Alice, I know that you weren't here at the start, but we were talking about how Greta Thunberg has really inspired and shocked people into having to take more notice of young people's voices. But I mean, that it's just, I think that people need to see that this is something that they have a stake in. But I think that it's understandable why for so long people haven't felt that way, because they haven't been given that platform, and they've been, and the people that we see on television, in the House of Commons or things like that, they mainly are just old men in suits.
Yeah. I wasn't slagging anyone off, by the way. I wasn't.
I know you weren't. I wasn't trying to kind of subtract your point and say that. No.
You realise what I said sounded quite like aggressive. I didn't mean it like that. But like, I think it's political awareness is an issue because, first of all, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So look, if you want to look something up online, it's quite hard sometimes to know if what you're reading is the truth or if it's heavily influenced by an agenda. So like you said, education, like having that political education, and cause I'll admit, when I was in school, I didn't know the difference between left and right wing. I didn't know anything. So having that political awareness, and I think especially for especially now with the Senedd votes next year, 16, 17-year-olds, it's crucial that there's a lot of information, correct information is being put out there about what is politics and what's going on, and how people can use their voices to influence what they believe is the right thing for them.
Hi everyone, I'm back. Sorry,
we lost our chair for a while.
My laptop died.
We were sad.
It's not actually plugged in, but it was. But I thought it wasn't. Like there's some really good points. I was still listening because I had it playing on my phone, so I was still hearing what was being said.
Oh, I think he's muted. Morg?
No, I can hear him. Oh, you're winding him up.
I can't hear him.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Hang on. What I'll do? I got an idea. Can you hear me now?
Oh. Hello.
There we are.
Alice, can you hear him?
I can hear you, Dal, but I can't hear.
Oh no! Okay, so he can hear. Oh, so hang on. So you can hear Alice as well. Okay, if he says anything important, I'll repeat it.
We had a similar issue with Leanne towards the end of the stream. Luckily, we're in the last sort of 15 minutes, and what I wanted to do was sort of round it up with 10 minutes of questions from the audience based on the topics that we've had, and then go into our final sort of, if you were First Ministers, what would you do? And then say thank you to everyone for coming and spending time with us.
So there's going to be 10 minutes of questions from the audience, Alice. And this is like I'm translating or something, isn't it? So there's going to be 10 minutes of questions from the audience, and then we're going to all kind of say, if we were First Minister, what is the one thing that we would do, and why would we want to do that? And then Morgan gave us advance warning that he's going to thank us all as well, which is nice. It's nice to know that we're going to be thanked. He's not going to say, you are rubbish, we're never having you back. So,
You might think it.
You might think it, yeah. But there's another Morgan.
Right, that didn't work. I tried to bring it into
Right.
putting a mic in, but it's not
But
working.
this is, you know what, this was going too smoothly, Morgan, because the thing is, I have yet to be in a single Zoom meeting where someone has not at some point left themselves on mute, or famously once, was not muted and they really thought they were muted, but so it would be remiss if this never happened. Are you outside now?
No, I'm on my phone. There we go. How's that? Can Alice hear me?
Technology.
Alice, can you hear him? Alice is frozen now.
I give up. We'll just have to deal with it. Alice will have to not hear me.
It's just a good pose, like.
Yeah, it is a good pose. I mean, there could be far less flattering poses. Like, on like the video stream, like if I've done a speech in the Senedd, then if we put a video up of it online, then there'll always be like, a kind of image of the speech. I don't know. I think it's just because I kind of move a lot when I'm speaking, but it's always me accidentally gurning or something. We can't ever get one where it's just kind of me just saying something, just being like, it's always like.
Can I spoil it for you? Usually the thumbnails are picked by someone. Usually someone decides what image is the one that shows. So someone's got it out for you in the editing department. I'd grab a word.
I don't have a word.
Is it you, Morgan?
It's not me. I wouldn't do anything to make Delith look any less radiant than she is in real life. That's not. See, everywhere. Right. I put a note up a few minutes ago about questions from the audience and whatnot. So we've had one question in that is quite an interesting one about industries and potential new businesses. So it's a good one that everyone can sort of get involved in. Delith, feel free to answer or not answer if you don't want to. But on the topic of industries in Wales, I believe one industry that Wales and its forgotten communities would benefit from is legal cannabis. This is not only something that will bring in large amounts of money and taxes to spend on schools, infrastructure, etc., but will also bring in real positive change to people due to healing and social properties of cannabis and hemp. It's also the future of literally green energy. So, what's the thoughts?
I agree.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I think, well, first of all, I believe that it should be legalized for a multitude of reasons. Like you said, obviously, there's the economic benefits, as we see in other countries that have legalized it, that it's added to the economy. But one particular reason for me is people who get prison sentences or who get arrested or different charges for cannabis. And it is disproportionately people of a BAME background that are affected by this. So first of all, legalizing it would help tackle those inequalities of people getting incarcerated for possession or for selling, and then that would help us also in turn look at drug reform in general, because the war on drugs has definitely not worked and it's not fit for purpose. And then look at the prison system and how that works and doesn't work, and really kind of fight those structural inequalities that come with it. So for me, it's definitely kind of more of the social kind of justice aspect that it can help us really try and eradicate that structural racism that exists within the criminal justice system, and kind of help free up space in prisons and look at rehabilitation as opposed to incarceration.
Yeah, I do agree with that generally. I think that the way that society, the attitude that we have towards people who take drugs is, in terms of criminalizing drug usage, it is completely the wrong attitude to have. I think I understand that people feel very strongly on not just, I don't think it is one of those debates where it's actually just about two sides. I think there are lots of nuances within the debate, and I do recognize that. And there are some people who I was in university with who were very habitual cannabis users who have had problems later in life because of it. But I do still think that the way that it is treated at the moment, I think that we do need to have decriminalization. I would be concerned and this isn't a reason to not do it. I would be concerned about how the tobacco companies could really get on the back of it and try to push it. But again, I still think that it should be decriminalized, because I think the way that we treat drug usage is very punitive, where actually, like Lewis was saying, the way that our criminal justice system works generally, there's so many people languishing in prisons when they shouldn't be, because of things where there are far more serious ills in our society. And actually, that there are so many people who, for medicinal reasons, do need to have cannabis and are not able to get it at the moment. Obviously, that's an injustice. So for lots of different nuanced reasons, I think that we should decriminalize cannabis. And obviously, I think that we need to do it in a responsible way. But there's so many social justice reasons which would be tied up with that, I think.
Meg, any thoughts?
Oh, I don't know.
And it's fine not to have an opinion on it, by the way. Like,
I probably do have an opinion. I just probably not the same as everyone else's. I definitely think for like medical reasons, it can help. I've been reading lots online about how it can help in certain ways. It's just I know a lot of people who have started on things like weed and have gone on to harder drugs and then have been addicted to them as well. And I know it's not everybody, but I also know a few people who do smoke weed every day, and they're just not on the same sort of mental state as someone who's not. And that's as far as my knowledge goes, is just from people that I know who smoke it regularly, and their brain is just not the same as it used to be. And I find them, but all the people I know that do smoke it regularly are on antidepressants.
And like someone who was in university with me had thought that that their kind of very habitual usage when they were younger had probably had a detrimental impact, which is why I'm saying that I think that although I think that it should be decriminalized, I think it needs to be done in a way that kind of goes alongside a public health messaging process, and I think that it needs to obviously be thought through. And this is something which people are going to have very legitimate reasons for feeling very differently on. I think it's a scale with this, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I do think that we need to change from where we are. I think that the concerns that you've got, Meg, I think that they're valid ones in terms of people starting on one drug and going to harder drugs. I wonder that, and then that I think happens because people always want to do something which is that little bit more taboo and more difficult to do. I think that if we looked again at how our society, the relationship we have with drugs generally, then maybe that would be different. But that's something that has to take place over time. And again, so I think that this is why this needs to happen in a responsible way, rather than just a knee-jerk thing happening straight away without any guidance to make sure that we don't have, again, the tobacco companies just swooping in and just popularizing it in a way that is not responsible. Morgan, what do you think about this?
So my opinion is very difficult, because when I was younger, I used to take drugs. I was probably watching this and I'm going to get a text any minute, but I did. I don't now, and I haven't since before my daughter was born in 10 years, yeah, give or take. So it's okay for me to say I appreciate what it's like to be a drug user, but I was never addicted. The most dangerous thing about cannabis is prohibition. Absolutely agree with Morgan Cruz on that. The issues we've got with drug users, and I class all drugs in this, whether it's legal drugs as in alcohol and tobacco or otherwise, is the issue of when you want to stop, addiction doesn't let you without a fight. You have that support. As someone who's an ex-smoker as well, I quit smoking when there was the big government push of full stop to stop smoking a few years back. And it really helped me because I knew I wasn't the only one doing it. I knew there was lots of people around, and I could speak to lots of people about getting the support for that. So for me, we solved the drug addiction crisis by removing the barriers to getting people their help. In the meantime, we also remove that then from criminal gangs that run the drugs trade. We reduce the amount of people in prison for non-violent crimes, and we support these people. We treat their addiction like a health crisis rather than something to be punished. And I completely agree with Meg. I have got friends that when I was younger didn't stop when I stopped, and they're suffering for it now. If we had a very honest discussion about cannabis and other drugs, the way we talk about alcohol and alcoholism, we wouldn't have people that are that in need of support and that in need of help, but feeling so vulnerable or so unable to get the help they need.
We need to change the way we need to change the way we deal with addiction, and the way, like the media as well, and the way that people who are addicts, wherever drug it may be, but especially the harder stuff, it needs to stop that demonization of people that are addicted, and stop treating them like they are criminals, but actually giving them the help that they need. So it's treating them like they're criminals and that they are some really bad people. It doesn't work, and they need help because it is a health issue. So shifting that focus from the demonization to actual rehabilitation would do a world of good, like kind of what they've been doing in Portugal and stuff, and it really helps.
So, Meg, just as an update from what Lewis has said there, and for anyone else listening that's not available, Portugal has one of the most progressive drug policies in the world, where they've almost completely abolished the illegal drugs trade through decriminalization and supporting addicts through safe means of taking the drugs that they want to take, but also providing them medical assistance, so the risks are dramatically reduced. And then also there's counselling and intervention support there, so people can get support from their people that they trust around them, their own family and their own friends, to help them, because the stigma isn't there. And I think that's how we help people who are in need of help, by taking away the stigma. So great question by Morgan Cruz. We've got a couple more minutes. I wanted to quickly go through one question from Sinead and then another one from Sarah Williams, because the one from Sinead is good about how we can reflect, and the one from Sarah leads into your First Minister's question. So Sinead, co-chair of Plaid Bank alongside myself, very proud of her. We're in a very different world from the one that we were in March for many different reasons. What have you learned, and what's something you think has changed, maybe permanently? Meg?
I think for me, it's definitely the working from home thing. There was, I don't know exactly what the statistics were, but the reports of how the world was just becoming a much cleaner place, and it wasn't polluted when we were driving places. You're not spending your life in sitting in traffic and things like that. And I think what older companies never thought would be possible is now possible, and it's just I hope it's going to change the way we live. And if someone needs to go and pick up their child from school, they can do so. They can work from home that day. I would like to see that element of being able to work. Obviously there's a lot of people who do have to be customer facing, but if they had bits of admin and they needed to do, maybe they could leave early and do them at home or something, just to try and get that flexibility and move into this century with our working habits. I think that is something that will help with people's mental health. And if they don't like working from home, that they have the option, like you said, Delith, to work in a hub, a communal hub or something like that. And that could help a lot of people with their job satisfaction, their work-life balance, and overall their mental health. Yeah.
Lewis?
For me, it was the issue, homelessness, because at the beginning of lockdown, there was a big push to temporarily house homeless people in hotels and hostels to try and obviously keep people indoors. And then as soon as the restrictions were lifted, that kind of security for them was just removed. So it shows that the government, UK government in particularly, can do stuff to combat or to eradicate homelessness. So it's more of a political choice as opposed to a thing that can't be done. And it kind of showed me that we can end homelessness. And this kind of leads on to what we were talking about earlier, but that's why I think a reason for independence is that we will have that control over those issues, over housing and the economy, those kind of things, that we can actually do things like Finland have been doing to try and end homelessness for good.
Absolutely, you're right. Homelessness, along with a lot of other negative symptoms of the capitalist society, are entirely political choices. They are decisions that people are making to do or not do something that results in a negative outcome for someone. David, what about yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, two main things. One is reflecting on what Lewis has just said and what you said as well, Morgan, that so many of the inequalities in our society are not inevitable, that actually that there are things like homelessness that were just able to be fixed, nearly eradicated overnight, and yet that there's still a political will for things to go back to how they were before, and that there's a danger of things to revert, because people are kind of talking, and we are talking, and gosh, I mean, I'm the party's shadow minister for the future. I want desperately for things to change, but there is nothing inevitable about those things changing. We've got to fight for them, because people who are in power, especially like a lot of the forces in power, we're not even just talking about Westminster, but like the very big businesses, they want things to go back to how they were before. And so I think that it's kind of shown us an opportunity that we need to fight to make sure that it becomes a reality. But then kind of also reflecting on what Meg was saying about how, the things are, you're able to work from home and things like that. The other thing which the crisis brought home for me was what a luxury it is to have access to green space, and that it shouldn't be a luxury, but that actually the people who have had gardens or live near a park have found lockdown so much easier. It should be a right for everyone to have that. It shouldn't be a luxury.
For me, my big sort of realization of how different things were in lockdown and how much different it could be is I've got two daughters. I've got a 10-year-old and I've got a 1-year-old. At the beginning of lockdown, my 1-year-old was a potato. She didn't move. She was just very quiet. She would crawl a little bit, but that was about it. Now at the end of lockdown, she's walking and talking, and unlike my 10-year-old, when she was a baby, I got to be home for all of this. I got to witness her first steps, hear her first words, and just generally be a part of the day-to-day parenting of my newborn child. And I think for me, that's not something that will change permanently or has actually changed for everyone else. And if you have a child now, it's not going to be the case for you, very unlikely to be the case for you, but you're going to get the same experience that I did. But that doesn't make it right. And I think my heart says it should be that way. Both parents should get the ability to spend a nice block of time helping to raise their child, especially in the early days, so they don't miss out on these fundamental milestones of the child's life.
Like they do in Scandinavia again, that they've got shared parental leave, and that's just normal, and there's no stigma about men taking time off work for paternity leave.
I love that they've allowed it to be a thing that for most companies where both parents work for the same company, there's no barrier there. You know, you can still do it. And I work for a big company that's got it in its policy that if both of you work for the company, you can split the time whatever way you want. The company doesn't lose out, but it does mean then that you've got 6 months of time to share between two of you. So it's either 3 months together or 6 months apart, or some mix of the two. I would like to see an equal time of paternal and maternal leave. The idea that it's an inequality, and it's a bit of a funny thing that it's the man that's not getting the unequal treatment for once, but it is, this is how I feel it must feel to be on the other side of this every single day. There's something working against me that's unfair, and I think every person that has a child deserves that right to spend time with their children. So I think that's what I'd like to see going forward. Final question from Sarah Williams. So I'm an indie supporter. However, I do believe Plaid need to focus on gaining votes, not just through pushing independence and a Bunyeth agenda, but through other issues such as nurse and carer salaries, education and jobs. People are still scared of the word independence sometimes. We have to work gently towards that goal of independence that is prosperous, which independence being one of the many goals Plaid can achieve. So pop yourself in Adam Price's shoes or Delyth's shoes in about 15 years, maybe less, and you're the First Minister of Wales. Yeah, you can do anything. What would you do? Who wants to go first?
Lewis, you can go first because I've already kind of said mine.
I've touched on this briefly, but I guess one of my biggest policies as First Minister would be trans rights. And I'd like to see a comprehensive rights for trans people and non-binary people. So, for example, in the Equalities Act, I'd want to see recognition of non-binary identities. I'd like to see people be able to identify as non-binary, so have a gender-neutral option on passports and birth certificates and things, and comprehensive healthcare, trans healthcare, make sure that trans people have full access to the healthcare that they need. And that's not just physical, that's also mental health as well. And cut the bureaucracy in gender identity clinics to make sure that trans people and non-binary people have that access without any barriers, to make sure that there isn't that discrimination and that trans people and non-binary people feel accepted in Wales without exception.
Awesome. Bit of an update. I've had a message off my mum.
About the cannabis thing?
She's asked her, who's Megan Coates? P.S. I knew about the drugs anyway.
I'm not sure if that's a good question.
No,
I'm sure that is a nice one. She's showing
a fashion company called Pethai, very popular amongst the youth.
Oh.
Meg, you've touched on it briefly already. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on your First Minister policy?
Yeah, sure. So obviously I run my own business, so this is very sort of like in my business mind. But I think if I was First Minister, I would want to do as much as I could to keep talent in Wales, especially young talent. Like you said earlier, a lot of talent, they might even come to Wales for uni, and they might have gone, a lot of the time, why are you in University of South Wales? Oh, I went through clearing. They didn't actually pick to come here. And then they go through clearing, and because that's quite a lot of, everyone in my course had gone through clearing, myself included. And it's kind of like I'd want to make it desirable for people from England or other places, or Wales or Cardiff, just because I know a lot of people, like we were saying earlier, from different parts of Wales will come to Cardiff. Quite a lot of people from Cardiff will go to London. It's kind of like the next big thing. To have options all over Wales, and as well to have options to stay in Wales but want to come here as well, rather than just being forced here through clearing. And if people are in the creative industry, that they are able to get a job here and not have to take that talent to London and Manchester and Leicester and places where, for example, in my industry, in the fashion industry, that's where all the people do go for jobs. And then, like you said, you've got to live in a little box when you could be living in the Welsh countryside. And your work-life balance would be better, and I'm sure your mental health would be a lot healthier if you were here in Wales and you could work in the industry that you actually want to work in. And going back to Catherine's point about the Welsh language, I feel like there's always been, when I was in school, like Welsh wasn't cool, Wales wasn't cool. It's kind of just bringing that back and saying, actually, it's really cool to stay in Wales. It's really cool to speak Welsh, because I was exactly the same. Grew up thinking I'll never use the language, don't care about it. And now I'm 27 and I've used the Welsh language so much, and it's given me so many opportunities that someone in my positions who can't speak Welsh hasn't actually had. There's so much to gain from being in Wales and speaking Welsh. And I think that's kind of like what I'd be driving forward.
Ideal. I mean, very much what I was going to say as far as keeping people in Wales and encouraging them to start their own businesses and be the innovators. Delyth?
So let's just take for granted that independence has happened then.
Yeah.
Because that is obviously something I want to, and as I've said throughout, that that's not just as the end. I want that in order to do so many things that we've been talking about. But if there was one thing that I could do that is a way, one of the reasons why I want independence, I would make it illegal for any child in Wales to grow up in poverty. I think it's a scourge on the conscience of us as a civilized society that at the beginning of lockdown, 1 in 3 children in Wales grew up in poverty, and now it will be worse. And as we've been talking about that, we were talking at the beginning of this conversation about how luck determines so much of a person's trajectory in life. Obviously, there will be exceptions. Obviously, you will have people who have come from very, people say deprived backgrounds, but backgrounds where there's not much money or there aren't many opportunities and they've made something of themselves. Fantastic. But it shouldn't be harder for people to do something with their life because of the way that they've been brought up through no fault of their parents or anyone in their community. So I think it should be against the law for that to happen. It should not be possible.
No, ideal, perfect. I think the fact that it's about just general people being cared for. No one should go to bed hungry. No parent should have to decide whether they're putting money into food to feed their children or electricity in the meter so they can go to bed without being in darkness. And that's it. In a country that is so energy rich, and resource rich, we shouldn't have anyone having to make decisions like that.
Exactly. And so I just think that there should be an obligation on every single Welsh government to make sure that that does not happen, and that they should be held to account that they have broken their promise when that does happen. Because otherwise you just get manifesto commitments where everyone says, oh yeah, we'll change it, and the numbers just get worse. So we need to take legislative steps for it. And
once it's in law, no one wants to be the party that removes that law.
No.
It'll have
to.
I
think it should be a founding principle of the Welsh Constitution.
So in the future independent Wales, the real declaration will say no child will go hungry.
Why on earth not? Why would we not have that there? Of course, we should be bold. We should be radical. We should change the people of Wales's lives for the better.
And one of the best things about this is that we can go full circle, go right to the beginning of the conversation again and say this is one of those things that is within the power of the Welsh government. Now we could be the independent country we want to be before we even get there. We could make this change now. All that we need is a country that is led by a party that cares enough to do it. And that is Plaid Cymru, led by Adam Price, First Minister in 2021. So final plug before we go. Anyone who is going to be 16 or over, by the time of the Senedd election in 2021, you must register to vote. I can't stress this enough. I don't ever tell my children they have to do something. They just know that if they don't do something, there's always consequences. One of the consequences of not registering to vote is you can't vote. And one of the consequences of not voting is you don't have your say. And as I remember not so long ago, I was a young person, I very much liked to have my voice heard. And it's important that you have your voices heard too. So please, after this, go to Google, type in register to vote and fill in the form. It takes less than 5 minutes.
It takes 2 minutes. It takes 2 minutes. I've timed it. And decisions are made by the people who show up. Be one of those people. It's going to affect your life. Please register to vote.
This has been really good as far as sort of having a conversation with the audience. I want to do more of the audience participation stuff, but I think we've run out of time because we're already almost 15 minutes over. There is a Southeast Plaid Ifanc conversation, Derek, in a couple of weeks, or is it?
I think it's next Saturday, actually.
Next Saturday. I'll have to find the...
It's not. It doesn't just have to be just for people in the Southeast. It can be free for anyone in Plaid Ifanc or who's interested in being in Plaid Ifanc across Wales. Anyone would be very welcome to join. So shall we post a link to how to join in the comments after this? Is that the best way to do it?
Yeah, what we'll do, so there is a Facebook event, but I'm trying to find the link. Josh was going to send it to me, but I haven't got it just yet. So I'll chase him up and I'll post it in the link here and we'll reshare it from mine and your page.
Great.
So what we can do, it's going to be a Facebook event. You set yourselves as going, and what we'll do when the call is going to happen, we'll send everyone who set themselves to attending a Zoom link. And then what you can do is you can all join the call and actually we can have a conversation much like this. It won't be live streamed. It's just to get people together and have a bit of a meeting, but because we can't meet in person and carry on this conversation. I think it's been really positive. So anyone who's watching that is thinking, actually, I'd like to say a bit more, then get in.
You will have an opportunity.
In the comments as well, there's a link to an Indie Wales Discord, which is very much this sort of thing as well. Carrying Discord being a live chat for Delith, yeah, like Zoom.
Hang on. Are you just in some way telling me that I'm not young enough to understand this stuff? Yeah, you were. Oh my goodness, we went 2.25 hours before he got a dig in at me for being old. Oh my god.
I never said you were old.
I didn't know. I didn't know either. So.
Thank you, Lewis.
I never said old. Just making clear everyone knows what Discord is now. Yeah. Oh, I'm mortally upset, Delith, again.
It's fine. I'm used to
There's a link to the Discord, and it's basically this sort of thing. What I'd love to see is people join that Discord and have conversations with each other about the future for Wales and what you guys want to see, because what we will be doing at some point is getting feedback from everyone and trying to help this feed into Delith's work as the Futures Minister. So yeah, that's exactly what he's doing, Delith. Shun him.
Ooh.
I need to say as well, shout out to all the meme accounts, because I can see that they're commenting, and they are like the backbone of the independence movement online. And some of those memes are top quality. So,
they're amazing.
So originally, when independence started to really get popular, like I said, around the time the first All Under One Banner March, leading up to that, the meme groups were the ones that got a lot of young people interested, because it takes away the boring politics bit and makes it relevant and makes it fun. And I think that's what we need to be doing. So more of this sort of thing. We'll share the link to the Facebook event that'll be on Delith and the Plaid Bank Caerphilly's Facebook page. By the way, new groups formed. So if you're interested, get in touch. Thank you very much.
History memes are best memes. Oh God. Now we have started a fight.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Diolch yn fawr.
Hwyl.
Ta-ra.